The last thing I ever questioned was alcohol. Those couple of drinks in the week and the obvious hangover symptoms, whether you have those or you don't, is the fact that it destroys your sleep, which then destroys your performance, which also destroys your mental health and well-being.
Andy Ramage is a former pro footballer, TEDx speaker, master in psychology, coach to top CEOs and professional footballers, the founder of the 1 Year No Beer movement and the co-founder of the Dry app. He's been described as the godfather of the alcohol-free world and has helped thousands of people stop drinking. He believes that going alcohol-free is like taking a limitless pill. It opens up huge potential within us that most people don't realize they are stifling by being a middle lane drinker.
I started to get up even a little bit earlier. I got fit, I got healthy again, dropped 42 pounds in weight, body fat 35% down to 10%, resting heart rate 68 to athlete 42. I went back to university twice to do a degree and a master's degree before work.
Andy, I've been looking forward to this interview for a while now. Really excited to have you on the show because as we were just talking offline, it's been just over 2 years now since I gave up alcohol myself. And the first time I did it, the first year was a massive milestone for me. And I marked it was kind of an anniversary and I thought I'd go back to drinking. I didn't. And then this second year, I didn't even know the date had gone. So I'm obviously in a very different place 2 years into it. So I'm really excited to have you here, talk all things giving up alcohol, motivation. So firstly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is my kind of chat, and to discover that you're already on this adventure with me before we came on air is wonderful, makes it even better.
Yeah, it's exciting. Let's chart back because you were saying you've been doing this for 10 years. How did it all begin for you? What made you start the no alcohol challenge?
Well, if I go all the way back, so I was originally a professional footballer, left school at 16 to go and pursue that dream, then got injured in my early 20s, very early 20s, late teens, and that dream was over, taken away from me, which was really difficult to bounce back from, but I did. And I ended up in the trading pits of London on the IPE, which is the International Petroleum Exchange, the guys in the bright jackets screaming and shouting at one another. And that was just that really social environment, high pace, high reward type of environment. But it also involved loads of entertaining, loads of drinking. We all had the magic cards where we could go out to any clubs and restaurants and everything was paid for. So it sort of brought me into a new type of lifestyle. Fast forward 10 years into that, I'd achieved a relative amount of success versus the traditional yardstick of income, I guess. But inwardly, I was really suffering in many ways. I was in my mid-30s then. I hadn't trained or exercised for the best part of 10 years. I'd put on lots of weight. I was unfit, unhealthy, unmotivated. Life had plateaued a little bit. I'd got early onset heart disease I'd just discovered. My relationships were somewhat strained. And it was a real awakening of, actually, what are we all doing? This is nuts. We're all working so hard to earn all this money, but what's the point if everything else falls to pieces? So I had my epiphany moment of, I'm going to do something different. So I quit that job, even though it was the height of that career, traveled the world, met with some of the biggest thought leaders and thinkers and trained as a coach, an executive coach, a guy called John Grinder, the guy that taught Anthony Robbins, which was a brilliant experience, blew my mind, came back to the world of broking to set up a new franchise. And I was going to do things differently this time. I was going to eat salads and stuff and exercise. And I dropped the dress code and we built a gym in the office and we were doing all these brilliant initiatives, but nothing would stick for me. Still struggling a bit with consistency in exercise and nutrition and even my mental health and consistency in the way I was showing up in the office. And then it was genuinely, it was the last thing I ever questioned was alcohol. It just wasn't up for question. It was part of who I was at that time in my life as a broker and as an adult. It's what we do, right? And I was in the middle lane, just to clarify that, someone that would drink sometimes heavily, sometimes averagely, sometimes not at all, sometimes moderately, which is about 70% of the adult population. There was no rock bottom, there was no addiction. That's not my story. I was that middle lane city kind of guy, drinking kind of guy. But the penny dropped and I thought, I wonder if I took a break from alcohol, would I get more consistent in these things that I'm trying to introduce to optimize my performance? And I took a break and the rest, as they say, is history. That was 10 years ago. And the benefits that, I discovered and maybe we'll explore were transformational in every domain of my life.
It's amazing, amazing story. Do you know, it was the same for me, right? There wasn't a like really strong, compelling reason, but I thought, I'm sure my performance is going to be better if I'm not drinking. And I also think I had fallen a little bit into that trap of, you know what, it's a nice way to unwind. I have a glass of wine with my husband. We have great conversation. So I thought, am I going to miss that? But I don't know what you think about habits. Was one of the first things I noticed is it opened up things that I hadn't really been aware of or dealt with that were prevalent in my life. And I guess underlyingly, I probably knew they were there, but I'd been ignoring them. So what came up for me is I, like you, used to be in the city. I was a corporate lawyer for many years. And so at a Magic Circle firm, and, you know, you're conditioned into working like all night, sometimes weekends. It was a real work hard, play hard mentality. And so I found that actually, and it wasn't an everyday thing, but it was often enough that, you know, my husband come home, that was the transition break. We just have a glass of wine. And you're not really going to go back to work, I found, after a glass of wine. So when I then gave that up, I found myself working in the evenings and doing things that I wouldn't otherwise, you know, necessarily have done that. And so I sort of had to address a little bit, am I a bit of a workaholic? Seemingly, yes. So I replaced it. And I sort of thought, well, as a coach, I know that if you create this gaping hole, right, you're going to replace one habit with probably another bad habit, which is what happened. So then I started, because it was summer, going out for long, and it was a beautiful summer in 2022, going out for like long summer walks with my husband. And that's how we would connect. So we were creating this new habit as part of it. But yeah, it was, for me, it was an eye-opening year, that first year.
Yeah, and a similar experience myself. When I removed it in those first 28 days, like instantly I started to notice a difference in all domains of my performance, and things were coming up all over the place that I just hadn't seen or that had been buried through those few drinks and the tiredness that comes from it. Because I think if you are in that middle lane, like the average drinker, that's who I'm always talking to, I don't think you realize the lid that it's actually putting on your performance. And I think for most people, let's just say if they're into their 30s or above, it's not even those couple of drinks in the week and the obvious hangover symptoms, whether you have those or you don't. It's the fact that it destroys your sleep. You know, we've got tons of research around that, which then destroys your performance, which also destroys your mental health and well-being. And it's not just for a day. The truth is it lingers probably for 1, 2.5, 3. So I started to do the maths and thought, hold on, if I'm drinking, you know, once in the week with clients and then I'm drinking at the weekend with friends, I'm never really out of the claws of this thing that is alcohol in terms of my performance. So for me, when I removed it, I started to get that back. I found more time, a bit like you just described. So all that time comes flooding back, and it's like, well, what do I do with this? I didn't know I had this type of time in my life. I thought there was no time. I told that story to anyone that would listen. I'm too busy. I'm a super duper broker and I've got family. There's no time to get fit and get healthy and study. And of course, there's loads of time. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, says it's not that we don't have enough time, it's that we waste so much of it. And I was wasting so much time through alcohol, not just the physical act of drinking the day after when I didn't have the energy I normally would, the fact that my sleep was destroyed, so I would wake up in a fight with the alarm clock. And of course, I removed alcohol suddenly. I was waking up before the alarm. That was just a gift that had never happened to me. I was like, what's this about? These mornings. And then, of course, I started to leverage that and thought, well, what would happen if I started to get up even a little bit earlier than I normally get up, say at 6 a.m. instead of 7, which became 5 a.m. 5 a.m. Imagine doing that consistently over time. The only 5 a.m. I'd ever known before that was when I was rocking home from a nightclub in Ibiza or a late night in the town. And then in that space, started to utilize that. Right, what can I put in that space? I got fit, I got healthy again, dropped 42 pounds in weight, body fat 35% down to 10%, resting heart rate 68 to athlete 42. I went back to university twice to do a degree and a master's degree before work, before the lads were showing up for work, started new businesses before work, read, studied, loved life, lived life, literally before most people were awake. So for me in that space, it was just like this superpower to uncover all of those things that it'd been getting in the way of, such as time, but then utilizing that time in a really proactive way.
That's amazing. Amazing. So you went back to university twice during this period. Were you still working at the IPE?
Yeah, absolutely. So really for most of my story, I was running my own brokerage in the end. So my own broking franchise, all of it part-time, the books, the businesses, the study, all of it part-time, which I loved. I'd done some study before, but I left school at 16 to go and pursue the dream of becoming a footballer. So I had to catch up with myself. But yeah, all of that study done part-time because I had the energy to do it, the mental clarity to do it, and the time to do it. This is the game changer I'm trying to get across to people, that by taking a break from alcohol for lots of people, that one benefit alone of time is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, no, it is. And I feel like the way I would describe it is you feel like a kid every day, right? Because you wake up with super high energy every morning because there's nothing really interfering with it. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing I've noticed. I'd like to talk to you about discipline, though, because it's very interesting what you said there. And then we can obviously talk about the habit and how people break it. But just to pick up on something you said there, because you mentioned how your wake up time, you got earlier and earlier and you're waking up before your alarm. And you started getting up at 5. I love the early mornings myself. But then you were doing these courses. So what did what does, maybe it's still like that today, what does your morning routine look like? Because you sound like you're hyper productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it still lives with me today, 10 years later, even though now I would class myself as an entrepreneur of sorts, that I managed to leave the city and that big corporate role to start lots of different initiatives all around coaching and training coaches and inspiring people to take a break from alcohol. So I get to set my own day. I still get up at 5 a.m. every day because I think in that space is protected time. I read a great book actually called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod.
Oh, yeah,
I read
that. It's great.
It's just a great self-development book. I met Hal actually, which was really nice. I mentioned him once on a big podcast that I was on, and he got in touch and I got to meet him, which was a real thrill when you get to meet some of your heroes, because that book is so simple. It's basically get up a bit earlier, and he calls it the Miracle Morning. But in that space, it's really important to me. So it's still really disciplined in the sense that I wake up at 5. I predominantly don't use an alarm clock still, because if you go to bed at the right time, you naturally wake up at the right time anyway. I find it certainly does for me. I'll come down here. I'm in my garden room at the moment. The first thing I'm probably going to do is exercise. It's really important to me. There's a bike behind me that I invariably will jump on. I then have a weights rack in another part of the house that I will also jump on. That involves a brief period of meditation. That involves grounding on the lovely grass that is just out of my garden room, journaling, and then reading. It's really important to me. And again, these things don't have to take like huge periods of time. They can be quite short periods of time. They could be, 5 minutes on the bike, 10 minutes on the bike. My weights routine's really quick that I like to do, but everything's on a daily basis. And then that sense of reading, even if it's only 1 or 2 pages, is really important to me, to fill my mind with something nourishing, and energetic, before then stepping into something that looks like a block of deep work. I'll often try to do in that morning space because I've got my most energy then. So deep work for me, Cal Newport popularized that concept of his great book, Deep Work, is that uninterrupted time. So there's no phones. I'm on a screen, but there's no pings from emails. Everything's shut down. And I'll try and get, if I'm really optimized, a good hour, maybe push that to 90 minutes. So that might take 2.5 hours, that whole period. But essentially the routinized part, I could, if I really needed to squeeze it in, I could squeeze it into something like 30 minutes.
Into what? Sorry, into 30 minutes.
30 minutes, yeah. And just have a little taster of all of those things.
Yeah, so you're very much following Hal's approach, where even he's saying, like, he takes it right down, doesn't he? Like 1 minute of journaling, 1 minute of reading, 1 minute of, like, I don't know, jumping jacks or something like that, if you're really time pressed, so that you run the routine. Do you follow those savers then every morning?
Yeah, or a version of that. But now I understand a lot of the psychology and science of habit formation. I know it's more important to do the thing. The times is irrelevant to an extent. Yeah. To build the habit, you need to do the thing. So as long as you're doing the thing for a minute, let's say, you're going to build the habit of journaling, even if it's only for a minute, over time. And then it's much easier to make that 5 minutes. So, for example, I went to the supermarket today because I'm building a new habit into my life, which is to go for a coffee. I do another block of deep work, which is near a supermarket, and I'm building in going to the supermarket so I can buy really quality food to come back and create, nice food for us to have at home. So I went there this morning without a plan. I didn't really know what I was buying this morning, but I just wanted to go there to build the habit of going there, if you know what I mean. And then once I've built the habit of going there, then it's much easier to have a nice shopping list with me and then I can actually get the ingredients I need to make some nice food.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much like James Clear, right? Make it really easy and also make it obvious, like getting your trainers out if you plan to work out, for example. And it doesn't matter how long.
Totally agree. So I'm a member of 2 gyms. I was just talking about this morning. So I have to make it really easy for me. So I walk past the gym on the way to the coffee shop where I have my coffee. There's another gym. The other gym has a pool. This gym has nice weights racks. So I've invested that extra bit of money to make it as easy as possible for me to get in even more exercise throughout the day. Should I need to, should I miss my morning routine or whatever it is, just make it as easy as possible.
So how are you structuring your day then? You were talking about deep work. I love Cal Newport's work. I've also had Stephen Kotler on the show, and we've talked about flow states and how does that look for you? Do you tend to do it in 90-minute blocks, or do you do some physical activity in between to recharge, and kind of how many can you fit in? I know our listeners will be really interested.
Yeah, so I aim for 4 of those a day, which is effectively 6 hours. I mean, if you're getting 6 hours of deep work, that you can achieve in 6 hours of genuine deep work what most people do in a week. Is the truth of it. Like interrupted time that most people are like busy all day and sort of get to the end of the day and it feels like not a lot's happened. You're in those deep periods of work. So I break them up throughout the day. As mentioned, I'll try and get 1 here. I'll go to a coffee shop. That's 2. That then brings me, because I walk there. So everything's built. I walk everywhere. I have a car, we have a car, like a family car, but I just don't use it. I walk everywhere. I've built the whole life around me, being able to walk and move. Gym, it's all built into the system because that just fills me up and nourishes me like with energy and life. And I like being outside and all those things. So I'm walking. So that's built into the plan, which gets me on average about 15,000 to 20,000 steps in my day, just moving to and fro. There's always, not always, invariably some physical activity in between the 90 minutes. So whether it's a walk or whether it's a gym, whether it's a swim, and then I'll come back here and try and get in another block of 90, which leaves me like 1 left for the day. And sometimes I get that and sometimes I don't. But if I can hit 4 blocks of 90, i.e. 6 hours of deep work, that's powerful. You can literally rip it up in 4 blocks of 90 a day.
Yeah, you can. It's so true. And it's interesting, actually, because James Hewitt's done some really interesting work around cognitive gears. And you're going from sort of high gear when you're in deep work or in a flow state, and then you need to down regulate to go into a low gear. And the danger is what most people spend their days doing is being in medium gear, right? Where they're answering emails, they're living to other people's priorities, they're having phone calls, they're getting constant interruptions, and the brain gets really, really exhausted. And that makes it harder, right? Because you never feel like you're moving on those goals.
So true. So I don't set my timer. So I have a timer that gives me my 90 minutes on all of my, like my laptop and my Mac here until those things are out the way. So if I find myself doing a little bit of that, it doesn't sit in my 90 minutes. I have to clear that first and then go into the 90, because all of this thing I think is worth reflecting on, because exactly that, where does your energy go? Does it go on answering those little bitty emails and you're constantly carrying that, switching task lag? And there's lots of good research around that, isn't there? Every time we switch a task, there's a lag that comes with that because we have to catch up to where we were. And then you switch back and and forth, and actually your output is diminished. So I'm a believer like yourself of going sort of all in on something for a deep 90 and trying to put everything out the way. And I find that's really super, super effective.
When do you schedule your admin tasks, speaking to your assistant, doing those sorts of things?
Yeah, those are the things that I dislike more than anything on this planet. So as I guess, an entrepreneur, you have to be really disciplined with these things, because if you're not, your whole life's a mess. So I'll give you a real world example of this right now. I sat down with my wife over the weekend and said, right, we need to map in days together. So on a Wednesday going forward, that is a day off. Nothing's going to happen. There'd be nothing in our diaries on a Wednesday, and my wife and I will go on an adventure. And that could be from going to Wimbledon to going to Kew Gardens to going to indoor skydiving. That will live on a Wednesday, because you've almost got to map it in. Otherwise, it just takes over everything, doesn't it? And you're doing little bits of admin, little bits of email on a Thursday night when you should be connecting with your lovely family. So I'm quite disciplined with this. You almost have to pencil it in. And then I think it was Jocko Willink says, there's freedom in discipline. There's freedom in discipline. And I really believe that. So I'm always trying to set my world up so it looks quite structured, but actually it gives me ultimate freedom because I haven't got to worry about when I'm going to do admin because it's built into the system. And I know on a Wednesday I'm off and Tara and I are going to go and do something exciting, which we'll book in. I block in trips away. I love to travel, so I'm always tripping and heading away. So to answer the question for those listening that might be interested, I block in the admin as well. So on a Monday, so we're on a Monday now, Monday today is like content day. So I'm recording podcasts, I'm appearing on podcasts, I'm recording reels, I'm writing newsletters. So I have a day of, because my brain can't handle it otherwise, I have to simplify it. On a Tuesday, it's delivery day, which is I'm delivering my courses when I'm training coaches. I've got meetings that day. People can book meetings with me, and that's where all the admin lives. It lives in a Tuesday in between all those bits. And then Wednesday's free, as mentioned, Thursday's free, Friday's free, Saturday's free. When I say free, freestyle is what I mean by that, i.e. there's not going to be meetings in there or podcasts or any of that good stuff in there. And also, like, I love living that life. For me, it feels optimal and, exciting as opposed to, and I've made this mistake, I've got meetings higgledy-piggledy everywhere. I've got admin coming out of every ear, and then it just feels like a bit of a slog.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It's the same for me. And I just think it's been life-changing. Let's track back to alcohol, because I know that many people try to give up alcohol. Definitely this was true for me. The first time I did it, I managed 30 days. Then I think I might have done 2 or 3 blocks of 30 days. And this kind of comes back to what we were talking about there about discipline. And I do it and I'd be like, yeah, I feel really great. But then nothing would change. And that was why the next time I did it, I was like, I'm going to do 90 days, because I figured that if the research shows it takes a minimum of 66 days to break a habit and create a new one, then I want to go well surpass that minimum and see how long. And I was very interested in that sort of voice in my head when the volume would turn down, that in a social environment, I wasn't going to have a drink. And for me, it was around sort of day 50-ish, around there. What do you think's going on for people who start this and they have really, really good intentions and they can feel the benefits, but they don't continue with it? And because you've helped, what is it, over 100,000 people, I think, now give up alcohol?
Yeah.
Which is pretty extraordinary. Well, what's the difference between the winners and those who don't seem to be able to keep it up?
I think it's ambivalence, that love-hate relationship in our brain with alcohol, which is most people carry. So there's that moment of awareness of, actually, I think this is not serving me anymore. Maybe I'd quite like to take a break. It's causing me anxiety. I think I'm underperforming. And then you take a break and have that lovely lived experience of feeling fitter, faster, a bit healthier, more consistent. And now you've got this noise in your brain. You've got a part of your brain that's saying, oh yeah, but you quite like to drink on a Friday night after a stressful day, or you've got that wedding coming up. What are you going to do about a wedding or a birthday or a holiday? All those old associations with alcohol. Yet there's another part of your brain saying, yeah, but you look amazing. You feel amazing. And that ambivalence, I think, whilst it exists inside your brain, requires willpower. And I write about this in my second book, Let's Do This, that willpower is like a metaphorical muscle. The more you use it, the quicker it runs out. So trying to run any long-term change on willpower is always doomed to failure, because at some point your willpower tanks are depleted, and then all of a sudden, instead of you using willpower to resist the temptation to have a drink at this big social event, you end up having a drink. And then often people beat themselves up and tell themselves they're no good, they've failed, when actually, in truth, slips, stumbles, especially with alcohol, is a necessary part of change. Just to let people know, that in itself can be quite motivational for people. But the trick, therefore, is to overpower or overcome the ambivalence. And I think what you described there brilliantly, I always call it the alcohol-free magic. There was a point in your adventure probably where you went, actually, the benefits of this are now outweighing like the old perceived benefits of drinking, the new benefits of not drinking, of just suddenly that ambivalence scales tipped in the favor of being alcohol-free. So it's a bit like, well, why would I drink? Now, it doesn't make much sense. I look amazing. I feel amazing. I'm getting more stuff done. I've got loads of time. Yeah, I've got that social occasion coming up. But nah, because I know what the consequences of are that. I'll lose that time. I'll put that weight back on, or whatever your story is. I won't be as energized. My mental health will take a battering. Therefore, I'm just going to continue. So I think it is that moment where that ambivalence tips. So a lot of the work that I do as a coach and training coaches, and the information I put out there, is to try and help people along that continuum by really getting them focused on the wins. What are the wins? What are the benefits that you've noticed? And really look at those and really celebrate those. And I think by doing so, it sort of overpowers almost any lingering ambivalence to go back to drinking.
Yeah, because you're creating that new neural association, right? Which was sort of what happened with me, effectively. I just felt very positive about not drinking, and the downside seemed too much, I would say. And I think the thing with me is I then, you couldn't, sometimes it's nice, right? You might feel a little bit more creative over a glass of wine, right? Or you're thinking through, or you're chatting about something. But reality was then I couldn't look outside of myself to solve any problems, because I was living a life of sobriety. So, and it wasn't that I would get drunk per se. It was more that, you sort of relax, right? You get that dopamine kick after one or two glasses. So now you feel maybe more open to things. And so for me, that's actually where the journaling kicked in, and the walks. Like, I feel so many things can be solved by a really good walk. Even a short walk solves a lot of problems. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With the journaling, how do you incorporate that? Because obviously you have a daily practice. I'm curious as to how you approach that. Is it free journaling? Is it that you're asking yourself questions? What you do and what you would recommend for others who want to access that inner part of themselves through journaling?
Yeah, so I use journaling in a few different ways, and I'm a massive fan of journaling, and have been for many, many years. I think it's really important. I think it's probably one of the most powerful reflective tools that we have at our disposal to really have a little conversation with your own brain at times. So I've used journaling in lots of different ways, particularly in the early stages of going alcohol free. Really, what was coming up for me? What were my thoughts and reflections? What were the wins? What were some of the things that I was struggling with? And very often I'd reflect upon that. So very much more of a reflective style of journaling. And in doing so, allowed me to see it from a different angle when you can read it on the page. Sometimes when everything's inside your head, you think you've got it untangled, but it's not until you try and articulate it onto a page that it then creates a bit of space. So I would use journaling in a quite reflective way, just writing what's on my mind. That then evolved into something that's much more structured now. And I've tried all the different types of journaling, best self journals and bullet journals and all these different approaches. But I just have one now that's quite focused in terms of momentum, in terms of optimal performance. So for example, I'll sit to my journal, I'll quickly reconnect with my values. It's really important for me to do.
So important.
Not enough people do that work. They think they can articulate your values. I certainly couldn't. I sort of thought I knew what they were until I really did some reflective work, found out what they were, and I write them out quite quickly. It takes me literally 30 seconds to a minute. It's an abbreviated list of values just to get grounded in who I am and who I want to show up as that day. And then I look at the goal that I'm working towards, like the bigger goal that I'm working towards. So I'll put that in a little circle. I call it like a moonshot. And the metaphor for this is that I'll have a moonshot, my big goals in there, and then I'll have some stars that spin off that. And the metaphor is aim for the stars and you hit the moon. And in the stars, I'll put one or two other big goals that I'm focusing on, but I'm not putting steps towards, but I just want them in my sort of conscious. And then I'll reverse engineer
Keeping
that.
them like sort of almost front of mind, right? So you don't forget about them.
Exactly, without actually taking any action. And I can't tell you how many times, I think, because I'm sure you're a believer in this as well, our brains can only take in a certain amount of information. So it needs to know what's important to know what to filter out. So it's very much like the secret of manifesting, where it gets its power is the sense that you've got to make an emotional connection to what your goals are. Otherwise, there's so much information going on. Your brain's just going to give you a load of like jumbled nonsense.
This is actually something I spoke to Dr. Tara Swart about on the show, who wrote the book The Source, right? The neuroscience of manifestation. And what you're talking about there is something called value tagging. So you're value tagging it in the brain. So now your brain will identify things that can move you closer towards that. So it's like how manifestation actually works from the brain's perspective. Whereas you might not have noticed these things, do you know what I mean, before, but because you're tagging them deliberately, you'll be shown different things that are relevant to you.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it is that classic example, isn't it? You go to buy a new car And on the, you get to the showroom and there's a red Mini and you're like, wow, red Mini, I haven't really seen many of them. That's pretty cool. I'll get, perhaps we'll put a deposit down on this red Mini, and then on the way home, you see loads of them, because you've just made this emotional connection. Your brain suddenly then can filter out that information. So I've always understood that and believed in it. So exactly that. I didn't have the words for it, but value tagging is perfect. So even though
are these just your goals that are like business, or are they family goals as well? Like what are you putting down each day?
It can vary, but predominantly they're around career focus. So it could be, writing a book, and a good example was whilst I was completing my master's degree, so that lived in there. That was like a daily focus. I put in a star TED Talk. So I started to value tag a TED Talk. I'd taken no action towards it. I hadn't thought about where I might do a TED Talk or how I might, or what even I'd talk about. I just started to put it into the stars, value tagging it as you described. And it, again, like these moments that it happens to me all the time, my brain started to filter the information that I needed. I ended up doing a talk for a guy called Will Polston. Someone was watching that really liked that talk, who happened to be running a TEDx talk relatively close to me. Someone dropped out at the last minute and they said, like out the blue, I get this phone call. I'm writing TED Talk in my stars for 2 weeks, doing nothing apart from writing in my stars. Literally a phone call. Would you like to do a TED Talk? Someone's dropped out. It's in 2 weeks. Yes, I'll do it. And these things, they feel serendipitous and
they do. But like it gives me goosebumps because like so many things, I don't know about you, have come into my life in that way because I've just set an intention around it and I don't even know yet how to achieve it. I remember doing a program with Bob Proctor and he sadly passed away. Who was in The Secret? He sadly passed away during it. And he always used to say, when you set a goal, you don't need to know how. You just need to know why you want it. The desire's got to be there. And when I first began the program, I was like, of course you got to know how. Like I need to map it out. That was the corporate lawyer in me. And then over time, I've come to realize that genuinely you don't, because these things just show up. As long as you're putting in the work, right? Obviously, you're moving in that direction. But it's really, it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's so true. And we can get so caught up in the steps, and that is a necessary part of it. Like you say, you have to do the work, but you also have to switch your mind on to what's important. But what that also makes me realize is if you're not channeling your mind in the right way, it will give you a load of junk. Yeah. And I think that's the case for a lot of people because their goals are not articulated, their values are not articulated. Your brain doesn't know what to give you. So you end up getting stuff that actually might not be serving you. And I think that's very true with alcohol as well. I think people get misaligned when alcohol's in their life. Sometimes they don't realize the true value of it or not, as the case may be. And I think when people do work around their personal values and their goals, very often that's what happened to me. I realized actually alcohol had no room. There was no room for it in my life once I was aligned with the things that were important to me.
Yeah, no, it's very, very true. I have something when you're talking about the gratitude and appreciation in the journaling that I use with my clients. Everyone I've recommended it to loves it. So it's basically just called at the end of the day, you cap off your day. So the first thing is to celebrate your wins. So you're like staying on track and you're appreciating the wins along the way, but also to celebrate anything you learned, right? Because failure is how you do learn. So that's like the C. And then the A is appreciate. What am I grateful for in my life? And then the P is priorities. So what are the 1 to 3 priorities for tomorrow? So you can go to bed knowing already what you're going to do. And it's just such a simple, like 60-second exercise. Yeah. I'm going to cap off my day. Do you know what I mean? But it actually makes a meaningful difference.
So wonderful and so powerful. And something I want to highlight again that you mentioned there about failure is so important. We live in this world where most adults have that perfectionist mindset or they're too embarrassed to fail, which shrinks our worlds. I'm sure you see it all the time. I continually run up against this, that adults in their professional career, I deal with a lot of professional athletes. So I work with the professional footballers, the PFA, Professional Footballers Association, in their business school. So I train some of literally the world's best athletes. It's incredible. But you'll see many of them have got a very narrow mindset in their world. And when they step outside of it, they're really fearful of stepping outside because they don't look silly. They don't want to make a mistake. So it stunts some of their career development after their playing days end. So I end up having to do a lot of work with them around that and encouraging people that failure, stumbles, slip-ups, setbacks very often are a very necessary part of change. And also I would argue our biggest upsets in life very often have the greatest lessons to teach us. And I think that's something important that we often forget. So I'm a real big believer about owning that out front. For example, in the alcohol-free space, I'm really clear to lots of people that actually, for most people, and I can back this up with the science of Prochaska, it takes 4 or 5 times around the whole behavioral change loop before you make a change. Therefore, that tells us scientifically, on average, most people are going to slip up. So let's just own that. And if you do slip up, what are your options if you do slip up? What can that teach you, as opposed to pretending it's never going to happen? And then, of course, you meet with that situation and my clients are not prepared for it in advance. One of the big things we do is we get prepared in advance for the eventuality that things might not work out, which diffuses a lot of the embarrassment or the shame, and actually empowers people to continue and bounce back.
I love that. So is what you're saying there then, that for most people, when they try to give up, they're likely to have a go at it 4 or 5 times before they succeed in it?
Yeah, on average. So for some people, it might take them 10. And some people might crack it 1 or 2, but most people don't crack it first time. So, and that belittles like the conventional wisdom. Most people are thinking inside their own mind, everyone else is perfect. I bet they've all just decided they're going to take a break. I'm somehow broken. I've got no willpower. It takes all of that away. And it's like, no, you're just normal. You're a human. That's how we learn and iterate and grow. Therefore, if it happens, so what? Don't give it the power it doesn't deserve. What can it teach you? How can you bounce back stronger? And that's why I say it's like an upward corkscrew. So it's not that if you slip up, you go all the way back to 0, like snakes and ladders. You just loop around the corkscrew, but you're always going higher. So 3 or 4, 5 times around that loop, eventually you might get to that place where you crack it and go on a longer adventure of sobriety, or whatever that looks like for you.
Interesting. And when you're working with people to give up alcohol and you're helping them through all these behavior changes, do you encourage them to put things in their life that demonstrate, like, to help them step into that future version of them, for example, to adopt healthy behaviors and habits? Because I know, for example, like when I gave up alcohol, I became more committed to my morning workout. And that actually then created a positive behavior loop for me, because I knew that I was going to have a great workout every morning if I hadn't drank the night before. So there was sort of another compelling reason, if you like. I'm curious how you, and obviously people can get the book as well to go into this a bit deeper, but how you help them to create those positive associations before they're getting results. Because that early bit is hard, isn't it? It's a bit like when you're working on a business goal, for example, all seeds are planted in the dark. How do they get through that part?
Exactly as you described. In many ways, it is about, right, what healthy habits can we introduce now we've got more time and clarity and momentum and consistency. And very often that manifests in exercise. As you described, lots of people that take a break from alcohol start to move their body more consistently than they've ever moved it before, which then compounds the results, which becomes in itself more motivational because they might look different. They might get into better physical condition. Like I did, I lost a lot of weight. What we know, on average, people lose 3 kilograms on weight, those that take a 28-day break from alcohol, for one reason. So we start to build those healthy habits. My whole approach, you've just described it brilliantly, is to build such a compelling future without alcohol that there's just no room for it. Because like you say, your morning routines are now optimized. You're feeling better, you're looking better, you're consistent in those exercise routines that you've been inconsistent in before. Maybe just your temperament. You start to notice that you've got more time, or you're more peaceful. I was lucky enough, I did the Virgin Breakfast radio show with Chris Evans recently. I'm sure you know Chris, who's huge in the wellbeing space, who used to be a massive drinker back in the heyday, but he's a year alcohol-free now as well, and brought me on to celebrate that. And his big win was a sense of peace and a sense of calm. That low-grade anxiety had just sort of fizzled out of his life, and he didn't want to give that up. So as you say, I think it's connecting people with some of the hidden benefits and also some of the obvious ones, such as more time, more energy, more consistency in terms of nutrition, consistency in terms of their temperament, work performance, and then occasionally the hidden win, such as a loved one phoning up stranded at 2 a.m. Can you pick me up? Which would normally have been impossible on a Saturday night because you'd had 1 or 2 drinks. And there's that sort of superhero moment where you can jump in the car, pick them up and rescue them, and you feel incredible for it. So it's a real mixture of starting some of those early habits just to give those obvious sort of visceral wins, but also staying focused on the outside or the more random benefits, and those culminated together can create this lovely momentum.
Yeah, totally. And what about in the evenings, when people, like if they're in a social situation or they're among friends, what tools would you give them if they're still sort of in that early stage of giving up?
The alcohol-free alternatives now are brilliant. I mean, that's something I didn't have, 10 years ago. It just didn't really exist. So I had to stand there like a bit of a plum with, a fizzy water that was like a beacon to say to everyone in the pub, he's not drinking. It was like alarms were going off everywhere. So I had to handle the social pressure. Whereas now you can stand there with, something that looks like a grown-up drink, is a grown-up drink. You just don't have the alcohol. And there's also the placebo with that as well. So I think that game has changed hugely to help people take a break. So I'm a massive, massive fan of alcohol-free alternatives. So I think that's a great place to start because you can still feel grown up and you have that placebo of it. And then I think it's just getting into your mindset. You're just training yourself again to socialize without alcohol. You're perfectly capable of socializing all the time throughout the day without alcohol. You're perfectly capable of socializing in your younger years without alcohol. So why do we think now as an adult, the only way we can do it is to drink alcohol? It's just not true. So retrain yourself to be in that situation with an alcohol-free alternative and enjoy the moment for what it is. And if the fun dries up, because let's just say the rest of the group are now a bit intoxicated and they're repeating themselves and it gets a bit annoying, and it does, right? We've got to own that. Then I think be courageous enough to look at what you've got on the next day. So I'd also say to people, let's just say you've got a challenging social event coming up, potentially have something planned for the next day that you're really excited about doing, whether that's getting up and going for a run, a spin class, or doing something relatively exciting for you. Have that planned for the morning, knowing that you're going to go up and show up and shine in this social event, and you're going to throw yourself into it and retrain yourself and go alcohol free and like lap it up and love it, and then jump up the next day and feel amazing. And you will feel incredible on the back of that. The first wedding you do, the first big birthday, the first social event, the power that comes from that, the confidence that comes from that is huge.
I'm so glad you said that because it's massive. That was what I was going to come on to say, is the hidden benefit, I think, is the confidence that you no longer need alcohol in any situation, whether that is for social engagement, which, as you rightly pointed out, people can be sociable all day long without alcohol. They seem to manage it. So you can have absolute total confidence there. You can manage your anxiety on your own. You don't use it to fall asleep. Like, it's never a crutch for any situation. That makes you feel very confident, right? And like you can really own yourself. There's an element of self-mastery.
I think there's two bits to it. I think there's the confidence. There's that, I call it power, but not in a diminutive way, as in your energy just changes, right? To be able to handle life, all it throws at you. Over 2 years, I'm sure you've had loads of life curveballs. We all do, same as myself. And dealing with those situations with a clear head rather than reverting to a couple of drinks like a lot of people would. Dealing with the big social events, dealing with the big business deals, dealing with life alcohol free. There's power in that, and I feel powerful when I'm in a room of people that are drinking and I'm not, because I'm probably the only person in that room not drinking, and I'm still connecting with everyone. I'm having the banter with everyone. I just feel strong in those moments. I think there's a real confidence that comes from that. And the irony is, we often turn to alcohol for confidence, for fake confidence and plastic confidence. And I always look at that and think, well, if alcohol really made you confident, the more you drank, the more confident you would be. And then reflect upon that people that drink the most, are they the most confident people? The poor vagrant you see on the street that's destroyed their life on the back of alcohol, are they confident? Of course they're not. Alcohol destroys our confidence. It chips away at it. So when you remove it, you have to regrow your confidence. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the whole adventure, because then that spills into every domain of your life. And I think that's why we see such huge transformations in people.
Very much so. Very much so. I love that. Before you go, what about just one last thing to do with is relaxation? Some people say, well, actually, do you know what? It's really relaxing. I just wind down Friday night. That's my thing. What do you do to relax now that you're 10 years without alcohol?
Well, before we get into that, let's look at, does it really help you relax? Is an honest reflection for people to make. Yes, in the moment, it's going to disrupt your neurochemistry, and that's what it's doing, right? So it's changing the lovely equilibrium inside your brain. That gives you a sense of relaxation. You're overstimulated on neurotransmitter called GABA that creates that sense of relaxation. But what goes up must come down. So play that tape forward as well. This is just pure relaxation. If you have 2 drinks and you stop, do you really feel more relaxed or less relaxed? 15 minutes later, when you're now starting to go into that little state of slightly uncomfortable mini withdrawal. Of course, if you have another drink, yes, you feel more relaxed again, but now you've tipped the scales into something that the next day is going to destroy your sleep. So when you wake up the morning after a few drinks, are you more relaxed or less relaxed? Less stressed or more stressed? So I think even the relaxation thing, it's mythology. Yes, it gives you that impression of it, and I totally own that. But genuinely, does it help you relax? I think if most people do that evaluation, they realize that actually doesn't, first and foremost. But equally, what does really help you relax? And this is part of that retraining, isn't it? It's like finding things that actually help me relax. So I like strength training. I like that. I like to lift.
I'm addicted.
Do you?
I'm addicted to strength training. Yeah.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
It takes my mind off
I don't
everything.
know what it is. I think because it creates order, a sense of order in my mind. It's the first thing I do in the morning. And I have days where it's like, okay, I can't my nervous system would be fried if I strength trained every day. So I have to do aerobic exercise and all these other things. But I just love it because just the counting of the reps and just the resistance, I don't know what it is. It's, for me, the neurochemicals, whatever it sets off, it is quite addictive and it creates order because it stops the chaos in my mind.
That's what I was going to say. But your brain's a little bit like mine. It's like it goes a million miles an hour in a different direction. So exactly that. It's meditation effectively is what it is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these relaxation techniques, the ones that really work, are bringing you into the moment. It's that flow state, present moment. So exercise is brilliant for me. It does it. Reading is great for me. As long as I'm not reading something that's too self-development-y, because that just gets me all hyped up again and my mind starts going a million miles an hour. So I'll try and read something that's fiction or historical. Reading is a beautiful way, I think, to relax. I will also have an alcohol-free beer to relax. I really like to do that. I'll only have one of them, but most nights, and I'll do it after this, I'll sit there and just sit down. I'm standing. I've been standing most of the day. I'm walking most of the day. I'll sit down with a nice alcohol-free beer, cold beer, and really enjoy that. I'm just skipping the bit that's going to take away my time, my energy.
Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was such an interesting interview. I loved everything you shared. And there are so many tips that people can start using straight away. For those people listening that are thinking, you know what, I want to take the plunge. I'm thinking about giving up alcohol. I'd like to get started. What's the best place for them to connect with you and everything you do to help people?
I'm getting such a buzz off your lovely smile as you're saying that, because we're both smiling a little bit because we've had a couple of incidences, to say the least. There is lots of ways to connect with me. My favorite way is just to go to my website, andyramage.com. There's lots of free resources on there, including a workshop if you want to come and train with me as a coach, life coach, executive coach, alcohol-free performance coach is what I predominantly do. Also, if you want to take a break from alcohol, there's a workshop on there that you might really enjoy. And then on Instagram, Andy Ramage Official, I'm showing up on there every day, trying to inspire and motivate people to take a tactical break from alcohol to unleash their limitless potential. So either of those is a great place to begin.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you.